My sister makes my family reject me for getting pregnant without being married, but the same thing is happening to her, and now she's crawling back. I, at 28 years old, don't have a very good relationship with my family. What I'm about to tell is mainly about my younger sister Silvia, who is 25. For a while, I had absolutely no contact with my family. Initially, it was their decision, and later, it was mine. I know this may all sound very complicated, so I'll try to explain my situation as much as I can. This post may be a bit long, but I think I need to tell everything about my past so you can understand the whole story. The context is necessary because I want to give you the most detailed version possible, so I'll talk about that first before explaining exactly what my problem is. I got pregnant when I was 23. I wasn't married, but I had a boyfriend, so basically, it was a child out of wedlock. For many of you, this may not seem like a big deal, since it can happen to anyone, and it happens quite often. It was an accidental pregnancy, and neither my ex-boyfriend nor I were prepared for it. It was too big to handle at the time, but there was no way to terminate my pregnancy. I was determined to have my child. The problem was that I was extremely scared and stressed about one thing. My family seriously despises people who get pregnant out of wedlock. I'm serious when I say they are very strict about it. I knew my whole family would disown me and isolate me once they found out. Maybe they would have been more understanding if my ex had planned to marry me and raise the child together, but he basically washed his hands of me once he found out about the pregnancy. He didn't want to be a father, and he definitely didn't want to marry me. When I refused to terminate the pregnancy, he broke up with me and told me to never contact him again. I was scared, completely alone, and didn't know who to trust. I was very afraid to tell my family because I knew how they would react. I was gathering courage to tell them, but Silvia beat me to it. She was visiting my apartment to pick something up and possibly snooped around, found the pregnancy test and prenatal vitamins, and then told everyone. Within days, my whole family stopped contacting me. My own parents said horrible things to me, telling me I had embarrassed them and myself. They said I was a failure and had ruined my life completely. Silvia spread the news among the extended family and made sure I was banned from seeing any of them too. She was enjoying the fact that I was practically being disowned. She told lies about how I was an easy woman. She even told some people that my ex had left because I was sleeping with multiple people and didn't know who the father of the baby was. All lies, of course. I tried to tell the truth to my family, but the simple fact that I was pregnant was enough for them to kick me out of their lives. They insulted me every time I tried to talk to them and even told me they would never be part of my life or my child's. This phase of my life was one of the hardest I've ever had to go through, even harder than the pregnancy itself. Strangely, eventually, my parents changed their minds, but it didn't matter because I ended up having a miscarriage. 5 years have passed since then. Now, I have a somewhat decent relationship with my parents and some extended family members. I was happy with how things were and didn't want to get too involved with the family again. Then, 2 days ago, my sister Silvia showed up at my door crying. Well, now she's in the same situation I was in, panicking. She's pregnant, and her boyfriend doesn't want to get involved. She wanted me to take her in and help her because she was disowned in the same way I was. Now, what happened is that it was much easier for me to deal with the situation because I was a working woman and had my own resources. Yes, the father disappeared, but that didn't really matter because I still had the means to raise my child. It was just bad luck that I couldn't stay with my baby. The stress of everything made me sick and ultimately caused my miscarriage. And no, I'm not making this up. It's what the doctor suspected since I had no medical problems and was very careful with my pregnancy. Maybe I was overwhelmed, but I did everything I could to keep my baby healthy. Unfortunately, it was too much for me, and what happened was no longer under my control. Still, even without a support system, I had my money, and I didn't need to depend on anyone. But in my sister's case, things are very different. She lives with our parents, didn't go to college, and can't keep a job for more than 3 months. I'm not sure what her problem with work is, and I never bothered to find out. I prefer not to know anything about her, and the few things I know come from my mom, who sometimes vents to me when she's frustrated. So, Silvia doesn't have the means to support herself, but that didn't matter to my parents, nor to the rest of the family. They're marginalizing and isolating her the same way they did to me. Maybe they think I'm a monster, but I refuse to help her. I didn't like how she showed up so confident that I would help her after everything she did to me. Silvia didn't like that I refused to help. She cried and cried until she got furious and started yelling at me. She accused me of being a miserable cow for not helping my only sister when she needed it the most. She also called me other things because, according to her, I was denying help, even though I had gone through the exact same situation. She was angry. I let her say everything, but I reminded her, in a very unfriendly way, how she treated me when I was in the same situation. That didn't matter to her because she refused to accept it. To Silvia, everything should be forgiven and forgotten because I'm the older sister, and she's the younger one, so I should show consideration for that. I got so tired of her at that moment that I kicked her out of my house and slammed the door as fast as I could. That didn't stop her from bombarding me with text messages and calls. She even made her friends interfere, telling me I was the incarnation of Satan, while she would be the Virgin Mary. Of course, they also mentioned that I was condemning my poor niece or nephew to a life of failure by not giving them the opportunities they deserved. I had to respond to some comments. I don't know if it was right to say they could offer that help since they were so determined to call me Satan. What left me a little confused and even irritated was that my parents called me asking if I would help my sister. I don't understand how, for them, it was fine for them to refuse to help, but I couldn't do the same. One thing that bothers me is that I know the child is innocent. I just feel bad for them. Silvia will never have my sympathy, but I still feel like I'm trapped in a bad situation. No matter what I do, I'll feel bad somehow. Not for Silvia, of course, but for the baby who will have her as a mother. Do you think what I'm doing is right? Any advice? Edit. Some of you asked interesting and direct questions about why I still hold a grudge against my sister, but apparently let go of what my parents did. Well, it's not that I let go of what my parents did. Simply, as I mentioned, my parents made up with me and did everything possible to rebuild a relationship with me. They reached out a month after my miscarriage and told me that, in the end, they didn't want to estrange me. They didn't know about my miscarriage. They were ready to accept both me and my child. Both my mom and dad were extremely kind about it and apologized for reacting so badly. They were very sad when I told them I had lost the baby. Since then, it's been a long and difficult battle for them. Over the next 6 months, I had no contact with them and rejected all attempts at reconciliation. They never gave up on trying to make peace. They apologized in every way possible, even went to therapy to work on it. When we started talking again, my dear sister rushed to the extended family to tell them that my parents were trying to forgive me and bring me back into the family. Many of my relatives revolted against this idea and pressured my parents to cut contact with me, but my parents instead cut contact with them and convinced the neutral relatives to accept me back into the family. I didn't forgive my parents on a whim. It took over 3 years of effort for them to win back my trust. They know I still blame them for my miscarriage, but they also blame themselves. I'm not interested in taking sides here. I'm not acting out of petty jealousy. My sister has been horrible to me and has never apologized for her part in all of this. In fact, she tried to manipulate the extended family to prevent my parents from reconciling with me. Do you understand how crazy and disgusting she is? How am I supposed to forgive her after all this? How do you forgive someone who hasn't even apologized? There have been some comments about how I should think about the innocent child and try to help my sister for their sake. It's easier said than done, folks. I don't see how I can help the child without helping the mother. One thing I'm clear on is that I don't want to help Silvia in any way. Call me bitter if you want, but I don't care. She can't even show me a minimum of respect and apologize for ruining my life, so I don't see why I should have anything to do with her. Fortunately, other commenters said that it's the parents' job to take care of the innocent baby, so I feel more at ease. It would have been helpful if I had welcomed her with open arms, if she had done at least a fraction of what my parents did to make amends. She doesn't even need to do something grand, but my sister hasn't even apologized. In fact, she keeps avoiding my questions about the subject. All she had to do was apologize. But no, that's too difficult. Also, many of you are upset with my parents, and I understand. It took me a long time, it cost me a lot to make peace with them, and I wouldn't say we have the same relationship as before. One thing that also confuses me is why my parents aren't helping my sister. I mean, now they know that their stance on children born out of wedlock is a bit outdated and not helpful, but none of this makes sense. They've cared for Silvia her whole life, so it's strange that they're now kicking her out. For a long time, I thought Silvia would always get away with everything because there was a certain favoritism towards her. I didn't expect Silvia to go through the same thing, but I would have imagined they would have acted differently, first because they made up with me, and second, because Silvia is their favorite. Maybe I should talk to them and see what's going on. All this confusion is messing with my head and irritating me. They want me to help Silvia, but they're not willing to stay with her. This behavior is very strange and suspicious. I don't know what the rest of the family is doing. Knowing them, I'd say they're not happy with Silvia and her life choices. In reality, they never have been. Silvia has always faced a lot of criticism from the family for not taking life seriously and being very dependent on our parents. I guess that's why she was so desperate to see me fall from grace, so people would criticize her less and shift their attention. Frankly, it's not like Silvia lost her way only in the last few years. She's always been a lost girl, one of those who like to get into trouble. She also never showed remorse for her actions. My parents tried to raise her, but it rarely worked. Silvia didn't take her education seriously, but pretended my parents would handle any academic problem she had. I'm not really sure what her logic was since I lost track of her nonsense a long time ago. It doesn't surprise me that Silvia ended up pregnant out of wedlock and without money to support herself. She always had the habit of being irresponsible and living under the mentality of, there will be time to think about the consequences. I know I sound hypocritical now, but I was very careful with my life. The pregnancy was a big surprise and came out of nowhere. The guy I was seeing had issues with fatherhood, so he disappeared when I gave him the news. Still, I had my life together and wouldn't have depended on anyone to raise my child. Silvia's circumstances are very different from mine. Anyway, I think I've vented enough for today. I'll try to talk to my parents and figure out what the hell is going on with them. I'll come back without shame to ask for help again because I know this confusion is far from over. I met with my parents, and we talked about the situation. Now everything seems much clearer than before. Sorry if I didn't reply to some comments earlier, but I knew as little as you did. With this post, I hope to answer everything I can, and if not, I'll reply to the comments after posting. First, many of you were horrified that my parents expected me to help Silvia while they stood idly by. I wouldn't say I was horrified, but I was very angry. We talked about everything, and now I understand exactly what they were thinking when they kicked Silvia out of the house. It turns out that my parents are completely fed up with Silvia. I had already mentioned that she is 25 and doesn't even have a decent job. My parents were understanding with her and tried to be less strict because their harsh parenting style wasn't yielding results. With my absence and lack of contact, they tried to do everything possible to make sure their other daughter wouldn't leave them, and Silvia took full advantage of the situation and exploited them without limits. My parents were already tired of her nonsense and ready to kick her out. In fact, they had already sat down with her and told her she should leave long before she got pregnant. Silvia constantly argued with them and would suddenly quit her job, saying they were mistreating her at the workplace. Then, she started insisting they couldn't kick her out because she'd be homeless. My parents decided to let her stay until she found a new job, but 2 months passed and she kept making excuses for not having one. The pay wasn't good, the economy was bad, or she had a new episode of her favorite series to watch. My parents were preparing to try to kick her out for the second time when she showed up with a surprise: pregnancy. This immediately interrupted their plans. Initially, they decided to let Silvia stay and take care of the baby so that she would have the opportunity to get her life on track. They were willing to support her, as long as she tried to straighten out her life. They wanted to do things differently from how they did with me. But Silvia had other plans. She told my parents that she wouldn't go back to work while pregnant because bending down could hurt the baby, just like I did, according to her. Yes, apparently she said that. Then people wonder why I don't want to help her. Of course, my parents said they couldn't afford to support her and her child for free. My sister's solution to this problem was to tell my mom to get a job. To give some context, my mom had to leave her job 3 years ago because she is partially disabled. She has many health problems, so working would be very difficult for her, but my sister doesn't care. She wants our mother to work herself to the bone, just so she can take advantage of her and have her raise her child. At this point, my dad got very angry and told Silvia that she was no longer welcome in their home and that she had 2 weeks to leave. They even gave her a formal eviction notice. She didn't care much. She thought they were just joking and that it was a bluff. Good thing she doesn't play poker. They even told me that they knew she would take advantage of them if they gave her the slightest opportunity, so they decided to cut the problem off at the root. The reason they asked me for help was that they felt bad for the child. They knew I could help the child while setting firm boundaries with Silvia. Additionally, for some strange reason, they thought I could influence and inspire Silvia to get her career back on track. All they wanted from me was to guide her and offer some support so that at least the child would be taken care of. I reminded them that I still don't want to have anything to do with Silvia. It's not my problem that she got pregnant. Giving support would be useless because she will never change. If people keep helping her despite her not putting in any effort, I know the child is innocent, but it wouldn't be fair for me to help my sister after everything, just because she got pregnant. My parents finally understood my point of view and apologized for trying to get me involved. We tried to think of solutions, but we really couldn't find a way to help the child. I took into consideration all your suggestions and decided to have a small meeting with my sister. I called my parents and told them that we needed to have a sort of family meeting to resolve this issue. We need to try to make Silvia understand that she can't rely on others to raise her child and that she needs to take full responsibility for it. More precisely, all the responsibility. I know it's probably not a good idea for me to get involved in this, but I can't stop thinking about the fate of my niece or nephew. It doesn't matter what the gender is, the child is a family member, and they're connected to me. My parents are out of their minds with worry and guilt. It's their grandchild too. I know my sister is definitely not a very smart woman, so we're afraid she'll take a wrong path if we leave her alone again. Yes, she's an adult and responsible for the consequences of her own decisions, but there's a baby involved. Some of you shared terrifying stories about how you had to do a lot of bad things out of desperation because you didn't know how to survive with a child. I definitely don't want my niece or nephew to go through those situations. As for my sister, that's another issue. I received many direct messages asking how the meeting went, so I'll provide an update here for convenience. I hope everyone who wanted to know what happened finds this update helpful. The family meeting gave us enough information to understand that she won't cooperate or accept our suggestions. My parents and I sat down with my sister last week. Silvia was very eager to come home and talk to us. I think she was sure she'd be welcomed back with open arms, maybe even expecting an apology from our side. I think she thought my parents would just let her back into the house and that I'd contribute to her expenses or something like that, but that's not what she found. My sister was extremely surprised and upset when my parents and I proposed a plan with several conditions. The plan was for Silvia to stay with my parents while she looked for a job. My mom would take care of the baby when it was born so that Silvia wouldn't have to worry about taking care of it. Silvia would have to pay rent to my parents 3 months after finding a job. This was to ensure that she wouldn't quit her job after 3 months, something she had done before. She would also have to pay rent and contribute to grocery expenses. When her child turned 1, she would have to move out and find her own place. My mom would continue taking care of the child, but ultimately, the child would be Silvia's responsibility. If you're wondering what my role in all of this was, well, it was none. I just served as the intermediary. My parents and I thought we were being more reasonable than she deserved, but she didn't see it that way. She exploded in rage and started yelling that we had planned to ruin her life by trying to turn her into a responsible person. She demanded that the meeting end immediately. We did our best to stay calm, because dealing with my sister now is very difficult. In the end, she stormed out of the house, furious, and threatened to stop us from seeing her child if we didn't do what she wanted. My parents are heartbroken and confused. I think my parents were quite generous with the offer, but she decided to refuse it and make things worse. No one is going to send her money just so she'll let us see her child, especially me. We don't even know where she lives, and she continues to refuse to speak to our parents unless we agree to do what she wants. She's treating this like a hostage situation. I've given up on her. I feel very sorry for the life her child will have, but at this point, there's nothing more I can do for her. I won't give her money or get involved any further. I appreciate everyone who offered advice and guidance on this issue, but it seems like this is the end. Yes, I'm posting, so the previous update wasn't the last, but with what I have to share, it would be very wrong of me to leave you without this information. Still, I promise this will be a brief update, but at the same time, quite impactful. My sister tried to sell her future baby. Not that she advertised it online to test the market, but she talked to one of our cousins, who, along with his wife, cannot have children, and basically offered the baby to him. At first, he thought she just wanted to give the baby up for adoption, but that thought was discarded when she asked for 30,000 reais in exchange. Our cousin didn't accept any of it. Instead, he came running to tell us. Because, besides the offer being very concerning, he said he saw my sister in a very bad state. Her face was very deteriorated, like she was sick or something. Since we've cut contact with her, or she's cut contact with us, depending on how you want to see it, no one knew anything about her until now. This is a bit of a scary update, for the sake of the baby. I'll certainly bring another update if something new arises regarding Silvia or her baby. I won't leave you without news, although I wish this were the last update. A lot has happened in these long months, so I have a bit of an extensive update to share with all of you. Before I start, I want to say that the baby is fine and healthy, so don't worry. I'll report everything that happened with her, because it's a girl, and with Silvia. My sister was arrested after a series of events and is now out. She was arrested for attempting to sell substances. Actually, not even sell, although she also consumed them. Even during the pregnancy, we know this because she confessed it herself, as part of her deal to enter a treatment facility. She said she had only smoked, but the judge asked for her to be hospitalized for a while. Only after proving that she had recovered was she able to avoid prison. Before that, she also tried to sell content online, but she must not have had much luck, because then she moved on to her second endeavor, so to speak. Now, she's out of the clinic and in better shape, although she still doesn't speak to us. We didn't ask her to do this, but I think it's okay. I'm not sure if I can say the same for my parents. The only thing that really matters to me in all of this is my niece, and she's fine, despite everything. Probably because she's not with my sister. After everything that happened, Child Protective Services got involved. My niece was placed with my cousin and his wife to take care of her. Over time, my sister decided to renounce motherhood and sign the papers to give her daughter up for adoption. This time, she didn't ask for money, because that wouldn't have been good for her case. I think the fact that she gave her daughter up for adoption allowed the judge to forgive her prison sentence. The biological father's signature was also needed, but he didn't hesitate to sign. So now my cousin is a father, and my niece stayed in the family. I think it's enough to say that this is a good ending for all the people I care about.